viewers, listeners, to another edition of Globespan 24/7, owned and operated by Mr. Nohar Singh, with Mr. Devin Bissoon as the techie operator. Today, we are discussing the status of the AFC, the no confidence motion, and we'll touch briefly on Haiti as well as on South Africa. With us tonight, there are two very distinguished guests. One currently a professor in Washington, D.C., Mr. Paul Nehru, Tennessee. He had told very, very interesting stories about that name Nehru and his experience in India. I wish at some period of time he could share it, but time wouldn't allow us to do it tonight. And our next guest is Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan. So briefly, for Mr. Tennessee was the former leader of, I don't know if it would be politically right to say, of the defunct DLM, the Democratic Labor Movement. Perhaps he may want to explain a little bit more on that. And then he played a very critical role in the restoration of democracy movement in Guyana, member of the PCD, before leaving to go to Washington, where he became a professor. He is very, very well known in the labor movement throughout the Caribbean and Latin America, and he visited India quite a few times. Also with us tonight is Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan, former college student of mine at Quarantine High School in Berbice. We were in the same classroom. In fact,
I am from Quarantine High too.
And he's a former member he's a former minister of office, national security, home affairs, public security. I suppose they are interchangeably used. Currently, he is a member of the opposition, APNU, and as well as the Alliance for Change, AFC. Correct me, Kemraj, you are still leader of the AFC.
Yes, I'm still leader of the AFC.
Right. So again, tonight we will be discussing the state of the AFC. We'll be talking about the three no confidence motions, and then we will we are going to touch on South Africa and Haiti first. So first, we have a video clipping, and then we'll have comments from the two guests.
The nation of South Africa appears to be in significant trouble tonight. Anarchy across the country in the cities and outside the cities. For more what's happening right now, we go to Kenita Hunter. She is a political editor at News 24 in South Africa. She joins us from Johannesburg. Kenita, thanks so much for joining us tonight. So we're experiencing this mostly on social media. People are seeing videos of what's happening in your country. Describe what's going on right now, if you would.
Well, there has been 3 days of unrelenting looting and violence in areas around Johannesburg, as well as Durban and surrounding areas, which you see started as protest against the jailing of former President Jacob Zuma. This was on Wednesday last week. By Thursday, there were sporadic incidences of violence, but over the weekend, this intensified to what President Cyril Ramaphosa has now called a coordinated criminality. Dozens of malls, shopping centers, and now even warehouses and factories have been completely looted by thousands.
Targeted in Gauteng province of South Africa after the imprisonment of former President Jacob Zuma. Violence broke out in several parts of South Africa, including in Johannesburg, and post this imprisonment. And Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar, that's the External Affairs Minister, spoke with his counterpart, South African counterpart Naledi Pandor, who has assured that the South African government is committed to restoring the law and order in the areas that are seeing disturbance currently, and specifically Indians being targeted at the moment. Preme Govinder, activist from Durban, South Africa, is now joining us on the line.
Go to Indian areas, not me saying that, I'm saying the court says that. Go to Indian communities, go there and kill Indians and burn their houses. Go to white areas, go there once you are done with looting, go there and kill white communities.
No, hey, do not be aggressive. Are you fucking serious?
So Paul,
Yes.
you have encountered and you have had students in South Africa that you taught in Washington, D.C., and you currently or recently taught courses on national security, criminology. Could you give your views of what you just saw?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm very familiar with Johannesburg. The last time I was there, I was at a UN conference. As a matter of fact, I met Vice President Jagdeo in the corridors. We had a chat at that conference. It was very interesting, the fight between Mugabe and Blair, where Mugabe gave the famous speech, "Blair, you keep your England and I will keep my Zimbabwe." Now, when I was at the hotel there in South Africa, we couldn't enter that hotel by walking in. We had to enter with a car going into the underground of the hotel, because the hotel all night, there were shootings going on. So the point I want to make is that after apartheid in South Africa, Johannesburg was and continued to be a serious problem of crime. But in this specific situation that has occurred recently, I just interviewed, before I came to the program, Shalane Byler, who was the president of the University of the District of Columbia Community College. And I mentored her, and we both presented papers in New York at a GOPIO conference. And what she told me is the following. She is saying that the problem in South Africa there is that the majority of the people are convinced that Zuma was corrupt, and they had marched in previous years that Zuma should resign. Secondly, that a section of the ANC and Zuma's people of the Zulu ethnic group are the ones that have been inspired by Zuma to carry out these activities. Now, Zuma thinks he's above the law. It's the rule of law. He was convoked to go to court, and he refused to go to court to answer the charges of corruption. He had a free opportunity to prove that he's not guilty, but he did not do that, and he refused to go. Then finally he handed in himself, and we had this. Now, the other issue that she brought to my attention was that the riots are not only the Zulu people, but there are various ethnic groups. And that the major reason why we have these riots, apart from the fact that the former president of South Africa is involved in this corruption issue, is that he lit a match. He took a match and lit a fire on something that was already burning, and that is the deep inequality in South Africa and the poverty and all the post-apartheid situation. What happened there in South Africa is that the ANC elite, the black elite, replaced hegemonically the white dominance of apartheid in South Africa, and they continued with a lot of the policies that were anti-working class and anti-poor. When I was in South Africa, I went as a labor leader, and I met the labor movement there. They were quite unhappy. So South Africa, unless there are radical transformational policies that bring people out of poverty, we are going to continue to have these kind of riots for other reasons. Now, regarding the looters, what has developed, and Kemraj probably would confirm this, because I teach world criminal justice systems, and I look at what is happening criminality across the world, is that we have had the emergence of gangs. And in South Africa, like Central America, like all the countries around the world, these gangs have become very, very dangerous, and they take advantage of opportunities like this. One young lady, when she was caught, the police told her, "Girl, you're in a lot of trouble." She said, "How am I in a lot of trouble? My boyfriend tell me to come and do this." So the point I want to raise is a sense of innocence of people who joined it, but because they're looting, they're looting and they're doing this. Now, what is not reported in the media is that a lot of South Africans have come together across the ethnic group, Indians, coloreds, blacks, and they are trying to provide free services to small businesses that were damaged, providing food relief as the most grocery chain stores were looted, and assisting local services with cleanup operations, assisting the police with recovering stolen goods from communities, and protecting current businesses and communities from additional looting. So there is a strong current in South Africa of citizens that are coming together. This is very important, and Kemraj will probably confirm this. The community has to be informed, has to be involved in human protection, in human security. And this is occurring right now in South Africa. So in spite of the news we are seeing, there are some positive things that are going on there. And two quick points. A guy by the name of John Kursa refused to stay in his home when there was a lockdown because of COVID in Johannesburg. And the police were very brutal with him, and he died. But since then, the police has adjusted their tactics, and they are more restraining as they deal with the looters that are happening now. And the last point I want to make, there is a sense that the military is getting involved. Please note, from what Shaila Byler told me an hour ago, is that the military has not intervened and is not shooting at the looters. The military is creating a framework that facilitates the police to do their work, because the police is under-sourced in both financially, physically, weapons, and so forth. So I think these points are very important, and as we speak of Guyana, you will notice that they may reoccur in our discussion.
Kemraj, you want to make a...
Yeah, I want to say that it was very bad leadership on the part of Zuma not to have legally restrained, do some manner of restraint in relation to his support base, in relation to that legal matter that he had. Look, institutionally, they are all there in South Africa. They have a wonderful Supreme Court, they have Parliament, they have all the other adjuncts and appurtenances of a democracy. But what a democracy also requires is very good leadership. And that leadership did not come from Zuma. Zuma ought to realize that when the court ordered him to come and testify in relation to his corruption charges, he ought to have gone there. He did not. And he forced upon himself contempt proceedings for not turning up, for which the penalty, I must say, was extraordinarily high. 15 years for contempt for not going to your trial is a rather extensive, elongated period. But it happened. What he should have done, and I understand that the committee that is dealing with this corruption matter wanted him to come, and they could have even made changes to that sentence. But what he did was to provoke even further violence by telling his supporters that they can't hold me in jail. And of course, with that kind of conflict and confrontation from the legitimate authorities as against Zuma provocatory acts, you will have this kind of thing. And then because of the extreme poverty of South Africans, the extreme inequality that cannot be done overnight, although it is well since 1994, the great Nelson Mandela took over leadership. It is not going to happen easily. And so that inequality makes what you call opportune moments like these for people to then go and loot and riot and burn down and then give themselves even a bad name for it. But people like Zuma might very well feel that, you see, it's power I got. But it is irresponsible use of that power. And it has not provided the kind of leadership that will take especially the black people of South Africa out from the quagmire they're presently in. And this is what, the lack of leadership and that can cause a whole heap of riotous conduct and civil confrontation now. And then it could also take on other things like against it becomes very tribal, and that has its own implications, that they will say they're attacking white people, they're attacking East Indians. Well, generally they will do the attacks on these people because they are more economically well off. And they have the grocery stores, they have the supermarkets, they have the big fancy stores, and that is what might be seen as the reason why they have been made vulnerable. But it takes on racial approaches, and then of course it could be used all over the world, even here in Guyana. And look how they're behaving, and then they put it and attach the black man into it, and look how they're behaving. I want us not to get that far into it, but understand the inequalities and the extreme poverty, and the fact that Zuma did not provide leadership in restraining his support base to stop the nonsense that is now going on, but rather stoke the fire, as it were.
Right. Just to give a little background, I happened to visit South Africa a few times, and I could tell you Johannesburg is one of the most beautiful cities I went to, with towering skyscrapers. And for me, the most beautiful city in the world is Cape Town. Far more beautiful than any city one can visit. Durban is also a tremendously beautiful tropical kind of town. Extremely delightful to go there. So and when you go, when I visited, from my very first visit in the early 90s, I was told by hotel people not to go into certain areas and stick in areas where there are only police officers. Otherwise, you'll literally be cut up. You'll not only be robbed, you're going to be cut up. And I saw cases of women and men being cut up. I saw once a Polish woman who was a tourist was literally slashed in so many places, in Cape Town of all places. So any other points you wish to make, Paul, before we talk briefly about Haiti and then
no,
on
we
to
could
Guyana?
move on. I think we covered the most important highlights, to balance the perceptions we get in the media.
Okay, so anything about Haiti? As you know, we have had an assassination of a president. Either one of you gentlemen want to talk about what really happened there?
Well, I'd like to make a comment. I know Haiti very well because I was General Secretary of the Caribbean Workers' Council for 8 years. So I have been to Haiti several times to assist the labor movement. But even when I was a student in Caracas in 68, 69, Haitians have always come to the university, the Central University, to recruit people to go and invade Haiti to fight the Duvalier regime with the Tonton Macoutes. So Haiti has, and I've written a piece in a book called Caribbean Workers' Struggle for Real Democracy, where I analyze the overview of the history of Haiti. Haiti, since political independence, when they became the first country to be free in the Western Hemisphere, and a colored country as that, have been through a lot of difficulties. And it's not only internal and about leadership, but it's also external. The French are not, like all colonizers, were quite vicious, and not only in Algeria, but with Haiti. And then Haiti was invaded even by the US and this kind of thing. So Haiti has been a victim of both internal problems at the level of leadership and instability, and externally. But currently, what I want to say is just one statement. When any society reaches a situation like Haiti, where situation is extremely unstable, there are people in that society who would take advantage of those conjunctures and try to do things that are unimaginable. Here is a guy who saw the instability, has a lot of money, and decided to contract mercenaries to go and assassinate the president, put himself in power, and promise the mercenaries they will be his bodyguards. So you have a lot of money, your country is very unstable, you're very ambitious, you see an opportunity, and this is part of it. However, my experience in global politics, and particularly in Latin America and the Caribbean and so forth, is that what you see is not what is. So I am waiting to know more about who is behind what, who and how. Because as more credible data comes out, we may find that this guy was not just what I just described, a rich guy that saw an opportunity of instability and wanted to be president. There are always forces behind that. And they are often the oligarchs of that country, or a fraction of them, or forces outside. And until now, you would see from the media, nobody is telling you exactly what has happened. Nobody has said exactly what has happened. People are saying we're going to investigate, we're going to make a report, and so we're waiting to see. But until now, I don't believe Haitians inside Haiti or outside Haiti knows exactly why the president was assassinated and exactly which were the forces behind it. But the point we have to learn from it is instability. And one positive thing about Haiti, very often when I went there, I sometimes attend the voodoo ceremonies. And on one occasion, there was an opportunity for a young girl about 12 years old to say, Haiti, Haiti. But the way she said it, it made my skin grow. That is not, we don't have that in Guyana. Haitians have a very strong identity as Haitians and a strong sense of the history. And it is that identity and that strong sense that have been helping them to go through and navigate all the ups and downs that that country has gone through before they became independent and after they became independent.
Ramjidan?
No, I concur largely with what Paul has indicated as the happenings there in Haiti, but also want, like him, to emphasize there are obviously foreign interests who would like to influence what these rich people who want to take advantage of the situation want for Haiti too. And you never could imagine that Haiti could get any worse, and then something like this happen, whereby presidents are being assassinated. And the circumstances of it all. I was watching I think it was CNN, in which they're saying that onto a street these fellas came that were supposed to have the bodyguards of the president or the president's men, and they were allowed. And the whole thing that happened was just the killings, and fortunately only he died and his wife survived. She's somewhere in America. But we really have to be sorry for the Haitian people. The poverty level, probably the poorest country in the world, the geographic location that causes it to have so many disasters. If it's not an earthquake, it's a hurricane, and then with the bad leaders that they have had over the years, inclusive of the Americans also doing a lot of things there by overthrowing governments, and also, like with this one, arguing the case that he should continue in office and things like that. So it is very much important that we understand the actual politics of it all, the subterfuges, the subversions, and everything before we can come to a solid, decision. But I rather suspect that there are foreign interests behind it all too, who are supporting this rich man and wanted to make some fundamental changes there in leadership, not necessarily in the quality of the life of the Haitian people, but just the leadership, so that they could then go and exploit and do whatever nonsense they had wanted to do. But there again, a very sad situation and a sad scenario.
Both you and Paul talked about Haiti being the poorest country in the hemisphere and all the problems that it faces, including being an authoritarian state. Would you does it recall days of Burnhamism? Paul?
I wouldn't want to say that it was the equivalent of a Haiti. Burnham did his bad things. Myself and you fought extensively in a high school era for that. I continued to be in Guyana. I noticed you left after high school and you went overseas. But then, of course, I became a leading member of the People's Progressive Party, and we fought that kind of rigged election scenario right up to 1992, when Sheddy then became the president of the country. But yes, I would not, however, regard the quality of that dictatorship as identical to what was happening because of so many other factors. As a matter of fact, Shetty liked what Bonham was doing in relation to nationalization. He liked a lot of the other things, and socialism and a whole set of Marxism, Leninism. Of course, I had problems with even Comrade Shetty on these scores. But the trouble is, I think they're chalk to cheese, quite frankly, the quality of the dictatorship and the brutality that existed from the Papa Doc and the Farah Doc, Papa Doc and Baby Doc, Duvalier, and so on.
I think that Bonham, I don't quite agree with Brother Ramjatan, and I don't agree with him because I saw Bonhamism as electoral banditry. He had military and paramilitary organizations that was extraordinary. They were repressive. I was kidnapped by Bonham's regime. I was fired at the university by Bonham's regime. I was haunted in that country regularly. I had to live in safe houses with the people in my movement. I was tripped at the airport every time I left the country. And every time I come back, they say, what you come back for? You know, so my view of Bonhamism is might be very different because, and I'm now documenting with empirical data what happened during Bonhamism. My friend, Dr. Joshua Ramsamy, was machine gunned under Bonhamism. There are some criminal activities that occurred. Vincent Tika, I could remember the day that they were going to give vote on critical support. Vincent Tika, Halim Majid, and Moses Nagabuntu stopped by at my house in Robb Street. I was visiting home as from summer. I was at York University in Canada and came home. And they told me they were going to go vote now on critical support. And Vincent was you all probably knew him more than I did. He was a beautiful human being. He was a wonderful person, and he should not have met that death that he met. So there are a lot of things that have happened, and of course, I don't have to tell you that it pains until now by many Guyanese, the assassination of Dr. Walter Rodney. He should have been with us today. He's the one who would have been the most qualified to comment today about what's happening in South Africa, in the Congo, and all over Africa. He wrote of how Europe underdeveloped Africa. You know, when I was in that conference at the UN, representing labor in South Africa, I was interviewed by BBC about the environment. And when I finished giving my views, I was walking back with a young white British journalist. And I made a careless comment and said, oh, you know, the problems in Africa is that the ethnic groups cannot get together, the black ethnic groups. She said, no, Paul, that's not the problem in Africa. So what is? She said, the white tribes have never left. We can compare and contrast, but we cannot say that two dictatorships are identical, because the dictatorship, I know about the dictatorships from Mexico to Chile in the 80s and the 70s, because I was in the leadership of the Confederation of Latin American Workers, and we gave a lot of refuge to Argentinians, to Chileans, to Paraguayans, to Uruguayans, to Brazilians. You know, there was no country, virtually except Venezuela and Costa Rica, that did not have a dictatorship in the name of national security. And it was horrible in Latin America. You know, they take you as a political person and they'll put you in a barrel of human excretion. They will torture you. They will put electrical things on your private parts. They will rape women in jail and abort them. The things that happen in Latin America are crimes against humanity that occurred. And Guyana did have a serious dictatorship in the context of Guyana, because we were not a people that, you know, that came through that kind of history. Guyana was supposed to be, as I grew up at Corteen High School, like you two guys. I was older than you. I was in the Literary and Debating Society. I was secretary of the Justice Party Youth Movement. I know I grew up in that politics. 1953, my father was in the independence struggle when they invaded our shop under Dr. Lakshman Singh in James Street, the British soldiers and so forth. So I know about that politics. I know Bonham personally. As a matter of fact, in '69, I went to see him with my father, and I said to him, I don't understand why you and my father have problems. He said, Patrick, since when you got Latin Americans as your brother? So my father asked me to explain to him what was a Confederation of Latin American Workers. He listened to me, I explained, and then he leaned back. He had a little beard, and he pulled it, and he said, idealism, idealism, pure idealism. Boy, what would you like to do? So, you know, that kind of dictatorship has its own context, but it does not minimize the experience that me and my movement and other movements like the WPA, the PPP, in spite of the fact PPP gave critical support, the militants of the PPP and the grassroots people of the PPP suffered enormously without any, you know, there was no reprieve on them. The leadership perhaps had reprieve, but not the people down below who fought, who were victims of that dictator. Food. Remember the KSI, the Knowledge Sharing Institutes. It was food as a weapon. Food as a weapon. You starve people. And secondly, it was racialized, the Knowledge Sharing Institute. And it was all for middle class. So one day we could talk and compare, but I think we have to take it in its context.
But you have set the context for us to talk. You have set the context for us to talk about the state of the opposition in Guyana. So now let's put Kemraj Ramjitan on the hotspot. Kemraj, how would you describe the state of the opposition? And then you could talk about the AFC more specifically.
Well, I would want to believe that it is as strong as ever. The combination of the AFC and the APNU has realized for the Guyanese people at least an extraordinarily very pointed, scrutinizing entity against the PPP government. And the PPP itself realizes that. The scrutiny that is required, the exposures that are required, the opposing that is required of a good opposition is what we are doing right now. I do not want to see what is happening, like say, in South Africa. I do not want to see what is happening in other countries happen in Guyana. And as an opposition, we must know where the red line is. And we feel that we are doing all that it takes to ensure that the Guyanese electorate, whether they be PPP supporters or the coalition supporters, understand the unconstitutionalisms, the executive lawlessness, the malgovernance and maladministration that is happening. And we did that recently with 2 financial papers inside of the parliament, $700 million going to a brand new entity called Regional Security Forces, crime fighting, and it being dominated by the army, the Guyana Defense Force, it coming under, right? Rather than the police force. I managed to ask Gail some very pointed questions, and it has been brought out that it was totally wrong. You do not go for crime fighting purposes by giving the army money. You give the police force. Similarly, with the Sputnik vaccines and so on, we see that there was a third man involved. Of course, we got an explanation from the Minister of Health, but there it is. We have found out now that they did not, and they could have easily gone to the Russian ambassador here to ensure that we do not overpay $600 million for this Sputnik vaccine. And very many other things, like the licensing for fisheries, giving people license who are not supposed to get the license. Also doing a lot in the Public Accounts Committee, doing a lot in the various other committees that are functional and so on. But also, very importantly, is that when we are also bringing up motions in Parliament, the fact that we see that the Speaker blocking them on technical grounds also shows that the PPP wants to hide a number of these debates. Take the debate that Juretta Finance brought in relation to Amerindian issues in relation to that indigenous ministry. It was blocked. Take, for example, the flaring of gas. It was blocked on the ground that it was sub judice. Take, for example, the urgent public importance motion on the flooding. It was blocked again by Mansour, a very good friend of mine, and I'm very surprised at what he's doing. But I now understand it was the PPP that were, kind of persuading him that they should be blocked. And that is not nice at all, because we want now, and that is why, and I come to the motions now, why we are now forced to bring motions of no confidence against ministers so that at least we can have a debate on their sector. Lots of shortages of drugs. I'm not saying that it didn't happen under the AFC coalition, but they continue to be, although we have managed to give almost all the money that they want and double the amount. Yet we still have a huge problems at the various hospitals. And so to that extent then, and also with security, so much thing going wrong with the police force. It has been polarized in the middle, divided completely. And then the Police Service Commission being threatened by words of from the president indicating, I want you, Paul Slow, to make sure that you promote these two men as against others. And when the chairman would indicate to the president, no, it got a certain procedure, the president then put down the phone and all of that. So look, a lot of things are happening, and the opposition is exposing, is scrutinizing, and by the way, we are also doing our groundwork. Whole weekend we were in Region 5, meeting our support base and talking to the people at the Barry, and I will come to that later, the very great punishment and sufferation going on inside of a Barry. I went down the creek and so on, and I can tell you just now a number of things that happened down there where the people want relief. And up to now, although we have granted $10 billion, we didn't object to it, $10 billion in that financial paper, along with some from the budgetary allocation before, we have not gotten any monies reaching down to those people. And then we, of course, have a huge set of money in the Natural Resources Fund. And none of it is going anywhere because the PPP leaders do not want to operationalize that fund. I will come to talk about that a little later, Vishnu, because that has a fundamental effect and impact on Guyanese. How do we spend that money? And that is why I want to believe that we are doing a wonderful job. And that is why in the press, some of the social commentators, every day they talk about the AFC, every day they talk about APNU, and sometimes they even talk more than the PPP. So it is because we are relevant, we are doing the pointed things, we are doing the significant things, and the important things, and that is why we are being called every day.
So when you say we, you're not separating AFC from APNU, you mean the total coalition?
We are a coalition opposition, yes.
And so you're speaking from that perspective, not from AFC.
Absolutely.
From yeah. Okay.
There are two separate parties, but they are at the opposition, and that was the question you directed to me.
Yeah.
What is the opposition doing? Opposition are acting jointly.
And I wanted to know the state of the AFC.
Well, the state of the AFC is as relevant and as strong as it was from the very inception. People like you and people like others in the PPP had said that it has no future. Third parties are not going to go anywhere in Guyana. But then we got 5 seats. Then we brought the government of the PPP, mighty PPP, into a minority in when we got 7 parliamentary seats. And then we brought it down from a government into an opposition when we got 12 parliamentary seats by working out a coalition arrangement with APNU. And people must understand that, because people seem to feel that all of a sudden, with a party with a big base like that, and we have a structure we do that is similar to the PPP and the PNC. We keep our regular national congresses or conferences every 2 years or 3 years. We are due this year. COVID has a problem, and that's created problem. But we have regional structures all across the country. We are the only third party that has regional councillors in all 10 regions. minimum of 1 in one, and about 3 or 4 in other places, like 4 and 6 and 5. So it is important that people understand that you just don't write off a political organization because you seem to think that it is so. When people were saying that only 193,000 votes we're going to get in 2015, we managed to prove in a combination with PAPNU that we got 215,000 votes in 2020. So people must not say that, and we have quality leaders who go the gamut of meeting the people, talking to them, explaining to them, and also then taking their suggestions and carrying the questions into Parliament. We in the AFC, through the various parliamentarians we have asked a number of very stinging, biting questions to the PPP, and you find them wanting to shy away. Some of them are getting like Zulfikar, getting real mischievous by saying that I don't have to answer that, and then go back in history about my ministry when answering a question about agriculture. So it is because we have gotten them on their toes, and they now want to be very offensive and insulting and so on. But we will keep the pressure on, and I'm absolutely certain that we have ways to go. We are going to do our job as the opposition.
Just to stick on that before I bring in Paul, the social commentator, socioeconomic political commentator, Freddie Kissoon, he says AFC is done, decimated, finished. You want to agree with him?
No, because he has been wrong on almost every score. He said that we are not going to get our 9 seats from APNU. He says that you're not going to become the prime ministerial candidate under Granger. Every single thing that fella has prophesized has been the reverse. And that is why, I don't bother with him. I think he's suffering from a lot of delusions. He feels that he can make parties and he can create parties and all that. But Freddie, somehow, he still manages, although we are a dead party, what he called us the other day, we are evaporated water or some such analogy. And yet, though we are evaporated water, that fella talks about the AFC in almost every bloody single column every day that he writes. What could be more contradictory when you're talking that the party dead and still talking about the dead? He knows for a fact that the AFC as a third party matters in Guyana because of the quality of its leadership and its organizational structures all across the country.
Okay, so I'll bring in Paul. But first we'll go for a break, and then when we come back, I'll ask Paul to comment.
Thanks.
AllFromOneSupplier.com has all your grocery needs, plus all of your West Indian items. Purchase all your groceries and all your West Indian items from one place and get free delivery to your homes and free shipping. AllFromOneSupplier.com has free deliveries locally in New York and free shipping to all U.S. states. Our shoppers choose the best items, packaged nicely, and delivered to your home. We have all your grocery needs and all your West Indian items, a one-stop shop. So place all your orders on allfromonesupplier.com or call 718-551-3292. That's online at allfromonesupplier.com or call 718-551-3292. Get all your groceries and all your West Indian items from allfromonesupplier.com with free deliveries and free shipping to all U.S. states. Globespan is pleased to announce Curry Duck Curry Punta Cana 2021. Yep, it's Globespan Curry Duck Curry with an inclusive vacation, 2-in-1 on August 12th to August 16th. Special performances by Terry Godraj, Sexy Marissa, the Tassamen, and the DJs are all going to Punta Cana on August 12th to August 16th. It's fun, games, party, and curry duck curry at BIK All-Inclusive Resort. All you can eat and all you can drink. Globespan has flights from JFK, Newark, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Orlando, and Houston directly to Punta Cana. It's Globespan Curry Duck Curry, and an all-inclusive vacation. It's 2-in-1 on August 12th to August 16th in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. All-inclusive packages include air, hotel, transfers, all meals and drinks from $9.99 persons. Travelspan Curry Duck Curry is sponsored by allfromonesupplier.com. Dave West Indian. Call Travelspan at 212-243-0865. That's Travelspan at 212-243-0865. Or book on travelspan.com. Globespan 24/7 continues its
Welcome back, viewers and listeners, to Globespan 24/7. We are discussing tonight the state of the opposition in Guyana, in particular the AFC. We are talking about the no confidence motion. We have just had a discussion about issues in South Africa and Haiti. Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan is our guest, along with Mr. Paul Nehru, Tennessee. Mr. Ramjatan just gave a synopsis of the state of the opposition and the AFC in Guyana. And now we'll turn over to Paul Nehru, Tennessee, if he would like to comment on what Kemraj said. Well, what's your view based on what Kemraj just said about the state of the opposition?
Well, first of all, what I would like to say is that since the three of us are alumni of Cortina High School, and I hope you guys
and our fellow Barbadians.
I hope you guys had participated as active as I was in Cortina High School Literary and Debating Society. I would say, Honorable Mr. Moderator, I differ with my honorable friend in the spirit of debating with what he has expressed. But each of us define the world from where we stand. I just want to say that when the AFC APNU came to office 5 years ago, there was great expectation in Guyana. And it was a very significant change that had a lot of young people very inspired and was looking forward to transformational change in Guyana. I am part of an institute called the Roraima Institute. And in 1 year after the AFC APNU came to office, I developed something called listening interviews, and I went to 5 regions and asked them a number of questions on their perception of the then current government of which Kemraj was one of the leaders. And 1 year afterwards, there was great disappointment in that government, great disappointment. And as I keep going back 2-3 times a year, continuing with the listening interviews, this deepened and deepened and deepened. And on almost every issue, it deepened. Now, when the APNU AFC had come to office, they came on the bandwagon of anti-corruption. But quickly in the country, a perception began to develop that the APNU AFC government was corrupt. But not only were they corrupt, but they seemed not to have the capacity to administer the affairs of the country. Look, taxi drivers all over the world are very good sources of information. And Black and Indian and all different nationalities. And they told you taxes. The taxes that Kemraj and them brought on the people during their period was merciless. Then the people spoke about leadership. Now, I think personally, Kemraj made a strategic error to have surrendered his leadership to Moses Nagamutu. I used to see Kemraj as a very courageous guy, as a very outspoken guy. You know, he said it as he saw it, whenever he said it, in his own language, which sometimes was a bit different than the parliamentary procedures. But I thought that Kemraj was a good thing for Guyana. But I was surprised what happened to the AFC and the PNC when they were in government. First of all, it seems that there was no real leadership from Mr. Granger at an executive level. And it seems to me that the way they were developing their business in the country is that the perception was growing that they cannot deal with the problems. And so that is one point I want to make. Now, the AFC lost the election. And I cannot understand how Kemraj and other people did not see in those five, first of all, that there was a no confidence motion. When Moses left the parliament, Moses gave an interview. He said, we will follow the constitution and in 3 months we'll call elections. Moses himself had moved a motion of no confidence against the Ramutar government. And the expectancy was, if that government had not resigned, that Ramutar would have had to do the right thing. And if the motion was passed, then they would have had to resign and go to elections. But they delayed it, prolonged it, and some people even believe that they could have won the elections possibly, I say possibly, could have won the election possibly out of sympathy that a member of the AFC crossed the floor and voted with the opposition. That's possibly, I say, I put my political scientist hat on there, possibly. But they delayed it and delayed it and delayed it for a whole year, having a government without the authority of parliament, almost illegitimate, illegal, like a dictatorship. Now, when the election did occur, no, come on. What happened in that election? The data was there, international observers were there, national observers. The thing was self-evident. And I cannot understand. As a matter of fact, Kemraj, in reports I have read, said to his staff almost that the PPP had won the elections. But then suddenly, so what I'm saying is that in itself destroyed the leadership of both the PNC and the AFC in more ways than one. Now, this could be repaired. Politics is politics. Things could be repaired, but I'm saying they were badly, badly damaged. Now, let us deal with the PNC. PNC has hegemony in that coalition. But the PNC is in total disarray. There is no the leader in the PNC. There is a leader. And when I heard Ramja Chan articulating just now with a lot of passion and energy and so forth, I said I better support him to become the leader of the PNC because they don't have a leader. God, they don't have a leader. The Afro-Guyanese people, I don't know why I like to knock my hand when I speak. It's a habit I developed at Quarantine High School Literary and Debating Society. Yeah, so my friends, I believe that there is a big problem now in the country. We do what Kemraj just said is very impressive, and I hope it's true. But I tell you this, that probably is only happening in the corridors of the Parliament of Guyana, because outside the people have a different opinion. I'm going back again at the end of the month to continue these listening interviews, and I'll call Kemraj before I leave and tell him what I think, what the people are saying. You know, I remember I studied the Mexican Revolution in New York University with an American professor, region by region by region. They had a dictator they called Porfirio Diaz, and an American journalist went to see him. And Porfirio told the journalist, he said, listen, why do you come to the country? What you going to do? He said, I'm going through Mexico to find out what the people are thinking. That's where I got the idea of listening interviews. And Porfirio said, when you finish, come back and tell me what you find out. 3 months afterward, the American journalist turns up, and President said, well, what did you find out? He said, President, there's a revolution coming. You have two options. You either join it or you're going to be thrown out of it. He didn't listen to the guy, and he was overthrown. Now, the problem is that in the minds of Guyanese people, they believe that since the PNC is the one that calls the shot, it doesn't matter if Kemraj jump high or jump low. They are going to judge that opposition on what happens in the PNC. PNC has a history of not only rigging national election and being branded correctly as electoral bandits, but their own party, they carry out rigged and fraudulent elections. Now, a lot of parties do it, But I'm saying they have a consistent record of doing it. And, you know, look at the people who have had disagreements with the PNC leadership. The former Minister of Foreign Affairs, one of the guys who's going to run. And none of them believe that the election would be free and fair and it would be managed. Now, you need a vibrant leader in the PNC if you're going to have a very good APNU AFC. And they have to develop a new strategy on how they will recover from their 5 years of government with the perception people have and their participation in the 2020 election, which damaged them both nationally and internationally. So I am saying right now there's a vacuum in the opposition of Guyana, and I do not believe that we will ever have a very good government as we try to develop a liberal democratic system, which Kemraj and I agree that that is what is needed in Guyana, unless we have a very strong and effective opposition that holds the government's feet to the fire on accountability and transparency.
So Paul, you're saying that Kemraj should become the leader of the PNC or run for leadership of the PNC. So let's hear what he says.
That is more in jest.
Perform as he did in this program, and he speaks at the PNC convention. Granger will lose. Harmon will lose. He might have a little problem with Volda because she got all these women behind her like an army, you know. So I don't know.
Ramjatan?
No. He's speaking in jest there. I have my AFC and the PNC has their PNC, and we will want to, as best as possible, coalesce on issues where we find that we can't meet on certain issues. Well, there we are. But it is a good thing for a heavily polarized society to bring social cohesion, at least with two important parties coming together. I would have thought at an early stage that people like Donald Ramotar could have called us in to talk to the PPP, but they play big shot. And they said Ramjatan has no relevance, absolutely no relevance. It does, and that was the same thing that Jagdeo made as a mistake, big blunder. And then when they get into a minority status, then they start cussing me, Nimakaram Ramjatan, and all the negatives. And then when you won a government, they could not believe that to begin with. And it has happened. Look, politics is extraordinarily uncertain in these parts now. And especially with a voting pattern that will remain largely ethnicized, but the ethnic groupings have gone beyond the 54. And like for the East Indians now, it's about 40%, about 34% for Black people, Afro-Guyanese. The mixed race is a big portion, and the Amerindians is another geographic constituency, ethnic constituency that we have to talk about. So you have to start articulating your policies, scrutinizing as we are doing, and notwithstanding all of that too is the additional thing about the Guyanese becoming far more educated, and with education they will become more right thinking and reasonable in their approaches. And so I believe with all of that, and of course with the PPP continuing its corruption, big time corruption, there will come a time when people are going to get fed up with them, and even their own supporters, like in 2015, not turning up to vote for them. They will abstain, and then you can have changes in government. In this liberal democratic order that I strive with people like Paul Tennessee to create, rather than the Marxist-Leninist kind of thing that the PPP wants, and still having its constitution, by the way, which at the Port Morant Congress, you know, Vishnu Bishram, I tried to change. The people will come to realize that, hey, notwithstanding certain flaws about the political party called APNU AFC, we will still be with them, because when you weigh whatever was done during the course of that as against what the PPP is now doing, it's executive lawlessness, they could very well come back on board and say, well, fine. And this is the evolution of even the great America with your conservative Republicans and your liberal democratic Democrats. So it is important that we do not come to this conclusion very sweeping. By Aliga last forever now. No, it is not going to happen. We will have changes. Young people are going to make the changes, and the different demographics are going to make those changes happen. What we got to do, political leaders, is to ensure that we articulate the policies that are good for the well-being of the largest society, and also be honest and not corrupt.
You said that AFC would have its own agenda. Would AFC function sort of independently in Parliament and support government on certain issues? If PNC.
Oh yes, certainly. We support the $10 billion. Vishnu, I want you to understand, it is this propaganda that the PPP is masters of. I think they manage it as a result of the humongous advice they got from Cambridge Analytica, for which Donald Ramotar paid $420,000 US. Brittany Kaiser, the Cambridge Analytica whistleblower, made that quite clear. Then from Mercury, another 34 million, they got a lot of advice. And they know the thing too because of their communistic methods and propagandizing. They know how to do this thing. But we have supported them. APNU AFC, by the way, the $10 billion came up. What do? We ain't objecting to that. That is required for the people out there. A whole lot of other things in the financial papers, we ain't object to because it is required. And so when on the ones that we object to, here all the fire and the brimstone is on, as if we are objecting to every blasted thing. 90% of that financial paper, and for one at least, we supported. And so this is what we do. There are a number of bills that came up that we supported. And there are a set of bills that have gone to committee stages, which we are refining, and we are all going to support the hire purchase bill, a number of the other bills, and so on. It is not coming to mind now, but all these amendments to certain other major acts, we will support. And that is how it will go. But that will not be spoken about.
I want to ask Kemraj a question. Kemraj, you emerge as a third force with the AFC. What do you see as the future of any third force? Because it seemed to me that you are so married to the APNU, which is, APNU is a dysfunctional organization. The WPA has withdrawn. They have established 2 cardboard parties with 2 individuals. The AFC is there. I know you have to present as a political leader. You're going to a convention. I imagine you are going to run again. So you have to present your story, and you're a lawyer. So, you're presenting your case. There's the arguments for and against. But step out of your role as a leader of AFC and the APNU, and let's think a bit about the third force in Guyana, the history of third force. Do you see the AFC as reoccupying that aspiration, that place for the third force, or do you believe a third force will emerge independent of APNU, AFC, and the People's Progressive Party?
Well, I will be very biased, as you would appreciate. The nature of the person that you're asking that question is the third party major leader, Kemraj Ramjatan. And I want to believe that it all depends whether we carry the work out on the ground, go and meet people, and not be a third party that is going to be at Pegasus Hotel or some other place, or conjoining with 3 other political parties to get a seat and things like that.
Okay, let me put it that way, Kemraj. Sorry to interrupt you, but allow me this. I beg your indulgence. Answer me this question. What is the fundamental difference between the AFC and the PNC? Because you've been with them for 4 years and you're now with them in the opposition. Name me one fundamental difference between AFC and the PNC.
Well, there are lots of fundamental differences.
Only one.
One is constitutional reform. We want to do away with that presidential
You all
power.
promised the people of Guyana.
Yeah, well, that is so. That is.
Nigel Hughes had it, and we haven't seen anything, brother.
Well, that is the point about it. There were some delays in relation to that. I think your good friend Moses.
The Chinese people an explanation. The people gave you all, deposited their faith in you that you promised. That constitution is the thing that makes me more angry than anything else.
Well, that is one. That is one. All right.
No,
I'm gonna take the blame. I will take the blame. I will take the blame. It was after the Nigel Hughes issue presentation of the thing. It got stuck at the Constitutional Reform Committee, and there it is. But asking me the question, answering now, please don't negative that answer by virtue of what wasn't done. It is a big, big problem. We also have a liberal democratic tradition.
So you
are not centrist
on constitutional reform. They don't want to change the constitution. Is that correct?
I get the impression that they would prefer to have the presidential powers remain the same.
Exactly, because in 1996, I had a meeting with Desmond Hoyt at 11 p.m. at night at Congress Place. We had a dialogue. Everything, myself and Terry Fort McAndrew, who was our executive secretary then of the DLM, we had a wonderful conversation about reforms that he had carried out and having not stopped.
Paul, with all of that.
But when it came to the Constitution, he did not want to. He did not.
Paul, with all of that, the PPP don't want to change that Constitution either, too, you know.
Yeah, but you have us in a big problem here. That Constitution was the basis of your third force. That was your advocacy.
No, it was anti-corruption too.
But local ended up being just as corrupt.
No, they don't ever classify.
AFC ministers are perceived in the Kemraj. Go ask the people; they're gonna tell you which minister corrupt, how he corrupt. Hey, one thing with Guyanese people, the people know what Guyana Kemraj. I know that.
Well, they gossip plenty too.
We can come back to that in a minute. We just got about 20 minutes left, so I just want to focus a little now we want to do the constitutional motions. I'm sorry, the no confidence motions that were filed on the order paper. I don't know when they're subject to debate, if it's on Friday. So there were 3 no confidence motions. 2 were first filed by the APNU or coalition against 2 ministers, the Minister of National Security, Home Affairs, and the Minister of Health. And then the PPP went and filed a motion of no confidence against the opposition leader. I want you, if you could tell us, Kemraj, about these no confidence motions, and then we'll get the views of the professor himself, what he thinks about these 3 no confidence motions.
No, well, I think that we are, in view of the points I made earlier, namely that we are being blocked from debating issues that the opposition wants heard, like the flaring Amerindian issues, indigenous peoples issues, and the flooding matter of public urgent importance, and all of that being blocked. And then, of course, having a pattern of what I call, and Paul would like it, the term prorogation for 98 days. For 98 days, Parliament in work. That is a form of prorogation. And then when it starts work, 3 or 4 of the major motions that were brought by the opposition were technically ruled out. Sub judice rule, flaring somebody bring case. So all you got to do now is to arrange somebody to file a case in court, and then the important institution, premier as it is, cannot do its work simply because some Jacobite brings something there on certain issues. I'm not saying that that which was brought by a Jacobite, but whatever it is, it closes it off. Now, I was at pains to tell the speaker, the sub judice rule in England has transformed dramatically by the present day speakers of that house. Well, not present day, since 2002. Because if you want to block a debate in the parliament on any motion, you simply go and bring a high court action. And it could be totally unmeritorious and frivolous and vexatious. And you block the parliament and the land from dealing with the issue of flaring when it has climate change and a whole host of the contractual obligations of Exxon and so on that we in parliament must debate? No, he blocked it. What do we do now? As I said, we want to talk about the health of the country, health sector. We want to talk about security because they're telling spheres of activities and it's hurting the Guyanese public. So what you do that which can't be blocked, a no confidence motion. And that is the motive. We know we're going to lose the motion. We are well aware of that. But if you get the opposition proroguing parliament and the speaker doing a kind of a prorogation by disqualifying your motions, we now have to evolve to being smarter by doing motions like the two we did, in view of the fact that the financial papers show so much massive corruption. Now, what that means, Vishnu, is that we are now fixing the agenda because like they get do for do, because we bring two, they go on and bring one. But like they did not understand the constitutionality of motions of no confidence against the opposition leader. In the constitutional reform process, that very robust constitutional reform process from 1999 to 2002 that we had after the Cross Commission and so on came from CARICOM, we had indicated that the opposition parliamentarians are going to have confidence in who will be the opposition leader. And that is why in the very first day of parliament, the speaker just tell the PPP people come out from the parliament, we will now select the opposition leader. And the opposition is selected by the opposition members. And in an article of the Constitution, Article 184(3), it is so stated that if you want to bring a no confidence motion against the opposition leader, 10 members, 1/3, I am using the word, the number 10, but we want 31 seats. So 1/3 of the non-governmental parliamentarians must bring to the attention of the speaker that we are proposing a no confidence against him. None 10 away and bring nothing against Joe Harmon. But this very garrulous attorney general we got, he liked to hear himself all the time. He got and advised Phillips, the prime minister, bring something back. Because they bring two, you bring back one. And they did not advise the man that the Constitution provides in relation to no confidence motion against the opposition leader. And then what the Constitution further goes on to say in Article 184(4) or Sim 3 is that by a simple majority, now that the 10 or the 1/3 would have told you that we thinking about getting rid of Joe, no confidence motion, we want all the 31 to be there, and a majority, 16, will now take him off. We can't even move to the very first step because none of the 10 members on the opposition or 1/3 have gone there. And I cannot understand. Now, I understand that the speaker now understands the issue. And that is why he has indicated that he needs legal advice. But the worst thing can happen. He gone and asked the man who advised Phillips in the first place for the legal advice. What kind of nonsense is that? He should have known that they got other Caribbean countries that got clerks who are very, very heavy into the parliamentary practices. Ask for that. Raphael Trockman did that when he was at problems in relation to certain determinations on parliamentary matters. You go to a specialist on parliamentary matters, and that is why we have CARICOM. CARICOM not only come help you elections time, CARICOM is also there to help you when you got parliamentary troubles like this. But they ain't got there. He gone back straight to, I am certain as the PPP tell Anil Nandalal to give the legal advice. Now, I don't know what is the legal advice, but that would be totally biased. I will not respect it if he says anything other than what the Constitution says. And so it's in that context then, we brought the two motions and now we'll fight against and ask for the disqualification of the one against Joe Harmon brought by Mark Phillips, our Prime Minister.
Paul,
Well,
you, as the professor and a
see
former
confidence
politician.
motions as a kind of tit for tat going on in the parliament. I do not see any indicators that there is a true commitment to a liberal democratic culture in Guyana. And I don't want to go into the reason why it's not so. But Kemraj, you know, I told you I do listening interviews, and I just received from a Guyanese this comment, and I'm going to read it to you, and I'd like to have your comment. There needs to be more involvement of the average citizen with our oil and gas sector. If the citizens don't understand how the mechanics of the sector, how can they understand the effect of the sector has on them? Our country is being devastated by rain and flooding, little being done to mitigate the weight of those affected by it. The EPA has also devised that Exxon's flaring has severely impacted our weather patterns, yet they have been allowed to continue flaring. While political big bodies have great matters to be concerned about, they are instead bickering over no confidence motions. That's a perception of the people. People are displaced. The cost of living has increased exponentially because the losses being faced by farmers and ranchers. Meanwhile, both opposition and government have been playing a ping-pong game of no confidence. That's what the people are saying you're doing, a ping-pong game of no confidence. I also feel like the AFC has become irrelevant and should just go hide in their corner. Now, I know I could share this with you because I know you're a politician, you have hard skin, and you will calmly respond to that citizen. That's a citizen.
Yeah, I think it is.
That citizen.
No. That comments like that have come to me directly too. And that is why I want to utilize opportunities like being on Globespan and all of that to explain. When we had that flaring motion, we wanted there to debate those points as to the oil and gas industry. You need a motion that is going to have overall impact in relation to all these issues. And we had prepared 5 or 6 speakers for half an hour each to talk on these issues. That was the flaring motion. And we had a lot of whereas clauses. We had a lot of resolve clauses that would have dealt with oil and gas. But again, as I said, it was disqualified on grounds of sub judice. So that commentator that you just read from, obviously
is an ordinary citizen of Guyana.
Yeah, an ordinary citizen of Guyana.
A millennial, Ramjatan.
Yes, a millennial. Yeah, well, I'm glad to speak to that millennial to say that how we are being blocked from bringing up all of these points, because that was the third big motion that we had. They won on Exxon and flaring and oil and gas, and it didn't come up. So now when we are utilizing the no confidence motion, because we are absolutely certain that the speaker cannot disqualify those, you understand me? The people are going to say, oh God, you see, they might only talk about no confidence. They forget already that I be tried for bring up flaring. Them don't forget that. Now, on the issue of this oil and gas thing, we have been knocking at the door all the time that there must be the operationalization of that natural resource fund, what we call the sovereign wealth fund. Paul, a lot of people don't understand. But when we did that act, we went with a Norwegian model of ensuring that it is not the politicos will control the oil money and how it is invested. It is 21-member committee that will exclude all parliamentarians. And we want trade unionists, we want people like Paul, we want accountants like Christopher Ram, and so on. They will spend that money. In the law, we put that they can't go and wildly spend it, and that 50% of the money must be kept for 20 years in future for the next generation. Okay? And we also put inside of that act a second bureaucratic tier called the Public Accountability Committee, so that they can take some oil monies, give Price Waterhouse or give people like Christopher Ram to ensure that the investment committee in spending the money, spend it wisely and spend it properly. You don't need an auditor general. That auditor general that we got there has become like a toothless poodle and so on. So the important thing now is to have your own public accountability committee that will see what the investment committee will do. And that is made up of, I think, 9 persons. So you got a 21-member committee and a 9-member to check and balance on them. What more could a good government do but to give on to its civilian population that kind of authority to spend the billions that we're going to have? You know what the PPP wants now? They want to go with the Kazakhstan model. They want to amend this Norwegian model that we took from Norway and to go and say, well, Minister of Finance, Bharat Jagdeo, the Vice President, and Irfan Ali don't have a big say in it. And a lot of people are not understanding the issue there. And so they now want to say, look, we know best. The 3 of them know best for Guyana, not the 21-member people if they operationalize the thing. And so that is why this millennial that you talk about, I will love to get hold of him and to tell him, ensure that that kind of thing is read and understood as to what we did. And that is the kind of education that they will have to have, at least for a start. And then we go on to appreciate lots more about oil and gas. It's not going to happen overnight. You don't become a professor overnight.
So what is the destiny of the Sovereign Wealth Fund? Because the Sovereign Wealth Fund, I put nearly 100 students to answer one question. I have their papers here. How have the people, citizens of country X, benefited from the oil revenues of a country, all the countries? And only in the global north, people have benefited. In the global south, there's almost no country. The people live for less than $2 a day. Now, the Sovereign Wealth Fund has been abused by many, many families and corruption. So you are saying
in the poor countries,
the previous government, this was done. What is the status now of the Sovereign Wealth Fund? Is it going to be implemented, as you said, or is it there going to be a change? And
well, that is what I'm saying. That is what I'm saying, Paul. We created the act and we passed it for these 2 committees made up of non-political and non-friend and family.
So what's going to happen to that?
Well, that is why we are asking the present executive, which is the PPP government, to operationalize it. Name the 21 member in the investment committee. Name them. You had problems and you cost me down for naming people for chairman and elections commission. Name the 21. Look, whatever the 21, even if it is going to be professionals, whatever, and so on, they will be far better than Jagdeo.
What is the response of the PPP to that?
The PPP do not want to operationalize it. And that is why, they do not want to. They said they want to amend it to make it the Kazakhstan model. Kazakhstan is not known to be a democracy. But they got plenty of oil.
Kazakhstan. That is a joke, if that is true.
Ramjitan, if I may ask, the diaspora person submitted this question. Why didn't you all address this issue of, you all mean in the coalition, when you were there, address this issue of flaring and to operationalize that?
Why didn't you operationalize it when you were in government?
Because we didn't start collecting the monies until, of course, the December of 2020.
Yeah, but you could have named
the monies were not there.
You could have named the people. You could have named them.
No. We did not want to name it. Elections was up front. You're going to name the 21. They're going to say you would have been the first to be critical. Just an elections, coming up, and you're now going to name the 21. You couldn't do that. You had to wait until after the election.
And then you have to develop a procedure on the criteria for this 21.
All of that is there in the act, Paul. I
will follow this up.
You couldn't address the flaring issue?
The flaring issue was being addressed by Mr. Vince Adams, Vishnu, and Vince Adams was giving the Exxon people a lot of trouble. And he was telling them that you only had 2 days to flare. After that, you got to stop flare. And even when the August 2nd came and all of that happened, they brought in some Canadian woman, a lady named Redford, to work along with Vince Adams in relation to ensuring that this flaring and other environmental hiccups don't happen. And then next thing, Jagdeo gets rid of Vince Adams. Get rid of Vince Adams, and
I
Vince
know
was the
Vince
man
Adams
that you
very
needed.
well. He's a very top professional. But permit me, moderator, just one last question to Ramjatan. I have the perception, interacting in the grassroots, that the grassroots of Guyana is disintegrating, and the grass tops, the leadership, cultural, religious, political, civil society, are polarized. Now, if this continues to happen, a disintegrating grassroots in the communities and a polarizing grass tops, it's a prescription that we will be on the road to Haiti, regardless of how much oil money we have and how much oil money will come into the country, because money does not resolve the problem of disintegration below and polarization above in any society. It's a prescription for disaster. One short answer. What's your response to that?
It will take leadership, especially of the opposition parties, to avoid that. And I am urging the government of the day to start the process of engagement with the opposition on these issues. We will always be what you call political foes. That is the nature of democracy. However, you love your country, you love your institutions, you respect your institutions, you don't go and Zoomaize them and all kinds of things. What you do is to ensure that you talk to the Irfan you talk to the Barjag.
You guys have a bad track record with the 2020 elections. You would have
well, whatever it is.
and why don't you guys be a good Catholic and say, mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa. Absolve yourself from that and move on.
Well, because we had a recount. No. Here we had a recount, and in the recount,
accepting that the slavery was a bad thing and they're begging forgiveness. Just say, man, that was a mistake.
No, we are differing here, Paul. Okay. We found a lot of irregularities. We found a lot of nonsense in the recount that we still have court matters dealing with. Okay. And please don't let us get there, because that will take another half an hour. No, the whole point of it, however, is to your question.
1 minute left.
No.
Yeah.
The important question is what you ask.
Yes.
And it requires leadership. It is leadership and restraint.
Will it come from the AFC and the PNC that is in a state of disarray?
No, I don't believe that we are in a state of disarray. If you want to see what is disarray, you got to go to some other countries. We are in Parliament. We're doing our work there. We are internationalizing what the PPP is doing. So and that is how you carry it.
And the PNC convention will resolve the question of leadership.
Absolutely.
Cameron, one last question. The PPP government has been urging the diaspora to come home and invest. Would the opposition support that request?
Of course, we brought back people like Vincent Adams, a master in environment and oil and gas. The PPP sent him packing, kick his ass out the place. Now, what it is that is credibility-wise or credit-worthy about the PPP statement that they want to bring diaspora in? No, they do not want, because these people are smart. You got to be smart to know how to deal with smart people. And inside of that PPP, some of them so blasted, blunt, they don't want to deal with anybody brighter than them. And that is why they wouldn't want people like Vishnu Bisram there. None of them. So understand that. We want bright people because we know our limitations. And we brought in a number of them. And of course, there was problems, big problems. And with the change in government, you have now all of them getting knocked off.
Anyway, gentlemen, we are pretty much run out of time. I would just ask you if you have any closing comments or remarks before we close up for the evening. First, Kamraj.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vishnu. Vishnu, I'm glad that I'm in Globespan. I'm glad I'm here talking to a lot of viewers. I know this is a totally different viewership from what I have with my boy Sherrod Duncan and the rest. It is important that, and this is what we got to do more. Some PPP people got to go on the Sherrod program. We have to come over here, and that is where the engagement can start at the roots level, as just mentioned by Paul, not only at the leadership level. When people at the roots level hearing across the floor, across the aisle, what the leader of the opposite side is saying, it will help. And that can create the restraint that can allow us not to get so provoked into conflict and, confrontation and conflagration. So I am very happy that I am here, and I'm glad that I answered your questions to the best of my ability. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thank you for coming. Do come again, Paul.
Well, I just would like to say that in 55 years, we have very little to celebrate in Guyana because we have not had any transformation of the country. I think one of the fundamental reason is because the leadership of Guyana never was really committed to the transformation of Guyana. So any kind of leadership that will emerge in the future that will bring hope will have to be transformational. And I would like to remind people that when Kwame Nkrumah was faced with corruption, at one point he couldn't take it anymore and he had the Dawn broadcast. And this is what he said: one man, one woman, one house, one car. I thank you.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Viewers, listeners, you have been watching.
Thank you, Paul. Good night.
Take care, Cameron.
Owned and operated by Mr. Nohar Singh with Devin Bissoon as our technical operator. Thank you again. Good night, all. Go catch the cricket match tonight.